Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yasmina Greco. I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I will be your host for today's webcast. As we get started for our event today, folks, we'd like to say a very big thank you to Cloudera, our sponsor for today's webcast. We'd like to let you know that Cloudera, the standard for Apache Hadoop in the enterprise, empowers data-driven enterprises to ask bigger questions and get bigger answers from all their data at the speed of thought. Reinventing the economics and performance of big data management, Cloudera is the category leader in Apache Hadoop-based software, services, and training. With tens of thousands of nodes under management across customers across a multitude of industries, Cloudera's depth of big data experience and expertise are unrivaled. Thank you, Cloudera. Folks, today we have Micheline Casey presenting what business people need to know about governance, about data governance. Ms. Casey is principal at CDO LLC, a boutique consultancy supporting the development of large-scale enterprise information management, data governance, and data security strategic plans and implementation efforts. Prior to CDO LLC, Ms. Casey was the first state chief data officer in the country and part of the governor's office in the state of Colorado, and was responsible for developing and executing the state of Colorado's enterprise data strategy, data governance, and data management frameworks across the state's executive branch agencies. Ms. Casey's work has been profiled in publications such as Public CIO Magazine. She was named on the 2011 Top 25 Information Managers list by Information Management Magazine. She has almost 20 years of experience in the technology industry, working in strategy, marketing, and business development roles. Ms. Casey recently spoke at our Strataconf this past October in New York, and her session was so well attended and received that we're really excited to have her with us today to present this webcast for you all. Let's go over a little housekeeping, folks, to get you the most out of today's webcast. You'll want to open your group chat widget if you haven't already done so. This is where we can interact with each other during the event and where you can submit your questions for Ms. Casey. We find that our audience usually has a lot of good knowledge to share, so we encourage you all to chat freely during the event. However, if you have questions for Ms. Casey, please preface them with a capital letter Q so we know that they're for her and we can make sure she sees them for Q&A. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you'd like to tweet from the Twitter widget today, you may need to give it permission to access your account. It will automatically append the event's hashtag to your tweet so you don't have to. And folks, today our hashtag is Strataconf, all one word. If you should have any problems during the event, please take a look at your help widget. If you continue to have problems, please post it in the group chat and one of our staff will help you right away. For choppy audio or stalled visuals, please try refreshing your window. And remember, the best thing you can do for a good audio stream is to close any apps that could be interfering. People always ask, so we'd like you to know we are recording today's webcast and we'll have an archive ready usually within 48 hours. And folks, without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Micheline Casey for her presentation. Hello, Micheline.
Hello, Yasmina. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to apologize a little bit. I have a cold, and I am going to do my best to project out to you. Please let me know at any time if you can't understand something that I've said. And additionally, I want to just let everyone know that we want to make this as interactive a discussion as possible. So feel free to, as Yasmina said, use the question and answer or Q&A widget to ask me questions at any point. And then we're going to probably leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for any additional questions. So we're going to just get going here. I'm going to talk through three sections. I'm going to give an overview of general data management principles. Then we're going to talk about how you would actually operationalize these within your environment. And then I'm going to wrap up with a brief discussion about how to drive more value from your data. So let's go ahead and get going. So we're all swimming in data. We understand this. We've got a myriad of different types of data, everything from structured and unstructured data, transactional data, operational and analytical data, as well as more and more social and sensor data coming into our environments. So the main question is, how do you pull it all together to make sense of it, to use it, and distribute it? And is your data actually at a point where it can be leveraged? If not, how does that impact the insights that are being driven from your analytics? If we look at industry studies, best-in-class companies take about 12 days or about 2 weeks on average to integrate any new data sets into their operational environments. If you're an average company, that's about 2 months, and laggards take almost 5 months or 143 days to integrate new data sets into their existing data systems. There are a lot of reasons for this, but traditionally speaking, if you think about how we've grown up in terms of data management systems, we've grown up in a world of very siloed systems with varying standards and formats, which can slow or prevent the rapid integration of data sets within environments. There has been traditionally a lack of strong data management and data governance practices across organizations, which results in an inability for organizations to be able to react quickly and limits an organization's ability to pursue new opportunities, to support customer needs, and to drive new insights. We live in a very dynamic environment today. The world is very data-centric. If you think about it, we're kind of like fish in water, right? The fish doesn't know it's in water, and it's just in the water. We're just in data now. The data is on our mobile devices. It's coming from sensors all around us. It's coming from smart grids, smart city appliances within our homes. Everything around us is generating data. This really drastically impacts a lot of industries in terms of their business models, their risk models, and the types of data requirements that they now need across their organization. There's a lot more flexibility and agility required in data relationships. We need much stronger data integration and data distribution capabilities. There's got to be a really strong trust in the quality of data and provenance of data, where it's coming from. Can we trust the data when we're making data-driven insights? And we've got a lot more pressure on privacy and security across our ecosystem. Now, just to make clear, I know that the title of this is What Business People Need to Know About Data Management and Data Governance. And as I consult with my clients, one of the things that I'm struck by is that business people generally don't understand that data management is actually a business problem. It's not an IT problem. And I want to make it very clear to you that data management, the business rules of data, the business processes around how data needs to be managed, who gets to have access to it, how it needs to be destroyed at the end of its life cycle, those are all business problems and business challenges. And you can no longer, as a business person, kick it over to IT and expect them to be in charge of the business of your data. It's time to take ownership from a business perspective. As organizations grow in social business maturity, data management, as well as the underlying technology maturity, completely support the work that needs to be done. This slide is actually a combination of two maturity models. Dion Hinchcliffe's social business maturity model is partially shown at the top, and Dr. Peter Aiken's data management maturity model is shown in blue below. As organizations, as we've morphed from a siloed infrastructure into more community-based and ecosystem-driven environments, as we move from predictive into prescriptive analytics, data management policies and processes can tightly support the integration of new data sets and the data distribution network that organizations need. As a supporting mechanism, you also have to have strong technical maturity within your organization to do things like cross-channel integration, SOA infrastructure, master data management to support Member 360 and Customer 360, for example. So if we take an example of a large retailer, let's just say Walmart, for example. Walmart customer Micheline Casey Walmart may not know that Micheline Casey, if their channels aren't tightly integrated, is the same as Micheline M. Casey in Sam's Club, or the same as MM Casey over at Walmart.com. If you as an organization are trying to understand and get a holistic perspective of what your clients are buying and how to sell more business to them, you need to be able to integrate that information across all of your channels, and strong policies and tools can help you do that. So what is data management actually? We're going to talk a little bit about some of the major components of data management, in particular that support big data analytics, and how can it support what you're trying to do with your data assets across your organization. So the data management framework that you're looking at here was developed through the Data Management Association International. It's an international standards body for data management, and it's a very holistic approach to understanding the information needs, as well as the entire life cycle of data, from data creation through data destruction. This framework provides a methodology for both managing and optimizing your data assets across your organization. It covers 10 functional areas, including data governance, and data governance is really the cornerstone of your data management practices. It's where policies and processes get set for all of the other pieces of the functional framework. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. One of the primary goals of data governance and data management is to really align the optimization of data assets with the business strategy, as well as the technology that's being implemented to support the management of those data assets. So I'm going to briefly run through six of the functional components that in particular can support your efforts in big data analytics across your environment. Again, we're going to start with data governance. Again, data governance is really the center point. It is the focal point for aligning the business strategy with the enterprise data strategy, as well as defining what the data organization and roles and responsibilities need to look like across the organization in terms of actually managing data. It also supports the enterprise development of policies, processes, enterprise standards, enterprise definitions, and enterprise metrics about data. We're all data consumers and data producers, so we all have a stake in this. Data architecture, which I want to talk briefly about without getting overly technical, but there are some major components that you as a business person should understand about your architecture. Think about architecture in terms of building a house. The architect has a blueprint, and that blueprint tells the builders, the contractors, the HVAC people, et cetera, how that house is going to be built and how the components of that house tie together. The data architecture or your information architecture should give you the same sort of blueprint for your organization in terms of understanding what the major data entities are in your organization and how those entities tie together, particularly across your various business units and across the siloed systems. Data architecture also helps provide common vocabulary and taxonomy so that you can actually make sense of your data across the organization. Master data management. Master data management is really the identification and control over core data values that are leveraged across your organization, things like person, product, entity, or organization, and identifying the most accurate, timely, and relevant versions of truth about those business entities. We're going to go into a little bit more about each of these pieces in a few minutes. Metadata management is data about your data. It provides visibility for you, for your organization, into what data assets you have, where those data assets live, what technology those data assets are sitting on, whether it's hardware or software, what business processes the data is used by, and who's actually responsible for those data assets. Data security. Data security has come to more and more attention over the last decade or so. Traditionally, I think folks in organizations think about cybersecurity when they think about security, which tends to be more focused on perimeter and network security, making sure the bad guys don't get in. But the fact is, security goes down to the data layer and ensures that there's policies around the classification of different data sets and that there's strong authentication and authorization controls. Who's accessing the data? Who's distributing the data? Can Micheline actually have access to the data sets that she's allowed to have, and what is she actually allowed to do with those data sets? So it spans the world of security, privacy, and compliance. And finally, I want to talk about data quality. Data quality has always been important and has always been very foundational and fundamental, but as we have moved into this very analytical world that we now find ourselves in, very data-driven, deriving as many insights as we can from the data assets that we have across the organization, we've got to have strong trust and confidence in the quality and the integrity of the data assets that we have within the organization across the entire life cycle of those data assets. All right. So again, I'm going to dive into each one of these things in just a little bit more detail, starting with data governance. Again, I want to reiterate, I can't reiterate this enough, business owns and drives the data needs of the organization. Your technology folks, your IT shops, support and enable what you're able to do via the technology that they're able to implement for you. But again, it's your responsibility on the business side to take ownership of the policies, processes, and standards for your data sets. This chart is actually taken from the Data Governance Institute, and I think does a nice job of laying out sort of the intersection that data governance really is between the business side of the house and the technology side of the house in terms of driving the policies, the rules, the decision rights, and accountabilities through to the actual technology implementation, and then providing back data, metadata, transparency, and compliance, and ensuring that we've got compliance with the policies, processes, and business rules that have been set down. Data architecture. Again, we don't want to get too technical because my guess is that everybody on the line, because of the title of this presentation, you're all from the business side of the house. There probably aren't too many people from the IT side of the house. And it's not that you need to be data architects, but conceptually, there are some basic concepts that are important to understand. Again, your data architecture or your information architecture are the blueprints for your data and the data that's important to your organization, where that data exists across your organization, and how those data assets need to be tied together. It provides common vocabularies and taxonomies. For example, is customer the same thing as a member? You may have one business unit that uses the term member and another business unit that uses the term customer. Are those the same thing? They may be, they may not be. That depends on how your organization defines it. In the Department of Energy, for example, they do a lot of research on renewable energies. If one laboratory decides to term all of their energy or all of their research around solar data, and they call it solar, but another research institution calls it photovoltaic, and we're looking at all the common data that can be pulled together, well, we're going to miss a big chunk of data because now we're using two different terms for what's essentially the same thing. The data architecture can help us identify these inconsistencies in data terminology across the organization and help us actually identify and be able to tie these things together. So it looks like we have a question.
Hi, Micheline. Yes, we do. We have a question from Dom, and Dom would like to know, do you recommend the data governance function as a separate silo in the organization, or to have data governance as an accountable task for every manager, like in finance, IT, operations, etc.?
Yeah, thank you, Yasmina. That's a great question. And I think the answer is, well, the answer is that data governance will sit hierarchically over top and span all functions across an organization while leveraging folks from each of the different business areas and program areas across your organization. Managers in marketing and finance and legal and customer service That's where your knowledge base is. Those are the domain experts, and those are the folks that understand the business rules and how the data actually can and can't be used. The governance function helps. It's essentially a coordinating oversight group that helps pull together and identify where the commonalities are across the organization and how the enterprise policies need to be driven across the organization. Operationally, I've actually got some slides in a few minutes that I'm going to hit on about how data governance shops tend to get set up within the organization, and so that may address in more detail the question that Dom's driving towards. Thank you very much, though, for the question. Okay, so that's data architecture. Master data management. I'm certain that almost all of you are familiar with master data management, at least in the sense that you're trying to do something like Member 360, Customer 360, have a single profile of a customer or an organization for your entire enterprise. That's what's termed master data management. Again, master data refers to those data values that are common and core across an organization. So multiple business areas, from human resources to legal to member services to marketing, all deal with people. So people, for example, or a person or a party ID would be an example of an entity that would fall under master data management. Product information often falls under master data management, as does organization information. Master data management, again, knowing that you probably have a lot of siloed systems across your organization, master data management is a collection of tools and technology that will identify where all the data sets about a certain type of data, again, where all your person data lives across the organization, and essentially roll that data up so you can have unique values for a given individual or organization. For example, my email address may exist over in Walmart.com as one thing, but it may exist as something completely different over in the Sam's Club repository. Well, which one is correct and which database should actually be the authoritative source of my email address? Is it the Walmart database or is it the Sam's Club database? Those are issues that master data management helps address and helps support within your organization. Unique identifiers tend to be driven from master data management technology. Unique identifiers not only for people or products, but also for organizations and entities. And the data driven from these master data management systems tend to act as a single source of truth for operational and analytical applications. Again, that golden record, that golden version, if you will, for a particular set of data elements about a particular type of data entity. Moving on to metadata management. So metadata, again, is data about your data. This is the information you need to know what you actually have across your entire organization, who's using it, who's responsible for it, what business processes consume it, what business processes create certain data, what business processes distribute that data. It also provides, metadata tools tend to also provide your enterprise taxonomy and enterprise data dictionaries. This is critical in terms of knowing what data you have so that you could actually properly leverage it, analyze that data, and secure that data. If you're trying to do big data analytics and you're missing a big chunk of customer data, for example, the insights you drive and derive out of those analytics are not going to be correct because you're missing a big portion of it. Metadata management can help you get your arms around everything that you've got across your organization. The last thing I'm going to talk about before we go into how you go about actually operationalizing data governance and some of these other concepts is data quality. Again, in order to meet the business needs of the organization, particularly in such the dynamic pace that we live in today, and particularly as we're looking at big data applications and driving more insights out of the data that we have and being able to leverage and optimize our data assets, we need to trust the quality of the data that we have. We need to trust the veracity of it, the integrity of it. Where does the data come from? Who's touched it? What's the percentage of certainty in guaranteeing the correctness of that data? There are a lot of different tools and processes by which you can go about verifying the quality of your data, and process improvement methodologies for continually refining the quality of your data. Data quality improvement, if you haven't done it before, tends to be or can be a lengthy undertaking. I wouldn't recommend trying to clean up all your data assets at once, but certainly it is quite possible over time to continue to cleanse and standardize the data that you have within your organization. A number of organizations actually certify data quality of data sets within their organization, and there's processes for doing that. And they will also certify metrics and the quality of the metrics coming out of analytical repositories and enterprise data warehouses. So there are a number of different things that you can do in terms of data quality to improve the quality and the integrity of the data that you've got within your organization. So now we're going to move into how do you go about operationalizing this across your organization. I've talked in detail about a number of the functional elements of that data management framework and the methodology, but actually operationalizing it, is a completely different thing. So we're going to drive into starting with a data governance model. How do you set up a data governance practice in your organization? What does it do? And what does it actually look like? So the macro level, again, data governance is really sort of that critical cornerstone for taking the business rules and driving enterprise policies, processes, standards, and ensuring that on the technology side of the house, the technology that gets implemented actually is supporting the business needs of the organization, the business data needs of the organization. Data governance operations and organizations, in this instance, it's called a data governance office in the middle of this slide, tend to be cross-functional and interdisciplinary. You want folks from across your organization, particularly from the various business sides of the house, the various functional areas with a key stake in the quality and outcomes of data, to be part of your data governance program and to be part of your data governance council. IT will actually sit on the data governance council as well and help support what the business side is asking for in terms of technology requirements. The data governance office is responsible for developing enterprise data strategy and the vision for governance, why governance is important to the organization, and identifying the priorities for the organization. It's extremely hard if your organization doesn't have a history of strong data management. To stand up a data governance and data management program can take a couple of years to get things really moving and off the ground, and there's a lot of different things to tackle, and your data governance office will need to set priorities for what's most important to the organization. Data stewards from across the various functional areas will be responsible for following the policies, processes, and standards, and enterprise stakeholders provide input to policies, processes, standards, and enterprise priorities. So let's just talk about roles and responsibilities a little bit. We've got strategic, tactical, and functional levels, where the strategic level, your data governance council, is really responsible for ensuring that the data governance program and the priorities of the data management organization align with the business strategy and the business needs of the organization. Again, your data governance and data management need to be owned by the business side and also be driven by business needs and business priorities. The data governance program itself is advised by the Data Governance Council, but the Data Governance Program or the Data Governance Office will be the folks who are responsible for overseeing the policy, process, and standard setting work that gets done across the organization. That can either be a central office that's located or functionally reports into someone on the business side of the house, a chief operating officer, a chief financial officer, or it can report into a chief data officer. Sometimes these programs do operate on the IT side of the house, but predominantly you're going to see them on the business side of the house. The data governance programs will partner with and pull data stewards from all functional areas across the organization into various committees and working groups depending on what the problem is or what the policy is that the organization is trying to tackle at any given point in time. And then functionally, the implementation of policies, processes, procedures, et cetera, actually happens across the various lines of business within the organization. Some of the key components for your data governance program from an operational standpoint include an enterprise data strategy, a charter, a priorities and roadmap document, a communications plan, and a repository, whether it's SharePoint or a wiki site or something that actually contains all of the enterprise policies, processes, the standards, et cetera, that the data governance program is actually developing. The other thing that's important for the data governance program to do with assistance from the Data Governance Council is to identify the story. Why is data management important to your organization? And this story is told from the business or customer perspective. It's not engaging the people across the organization to want to participate with you if you say, we want to have 99% data quality. What's engaging and important and ties to the business is to say, we want to have stronger consumer engagement. We want to deliver the best products, and so we have to have the best information about products and competitive information in the marketplace. So the story is really why you're doing the data management and data governance, but told from the business or customer perspective. I've got a couple slides to show more of an org chart view of how a data governance, data management program could actually look within an organization. This first one is actually taken from the state of Colorado, where I worked. Over on the left, there is a chief data officer role in purple, a box in purple. And right above that is the Governance Data Advisory Board. The Governance Data Advisory Board was the Data Governance Council that we established in legislation in the state of Colorado. And as you can see from the lines, that governance board was actually established to advise and support the Chief Information Officer who reports to the governor on enterprise data management needs. The Chief Data Officer in the state of Colorado actually chaired the enterprise or the Data Governance Board and had a data stewards organization that was made up of folks from the various agencies across the state government branch agencies. The next slide shows a slightly different view. This view is more from a business perspective. We've got the Data Strategy Center in the middle. That group could be led by the Chief Data Officer or Chief Operating Officer. That Data Strategy Center is advised by the Data Advisory Council, made up of that cross-functional executive team from the various business units across the organization. The Data Advisory Council typically tends to be the people running your various lines of business. They're either vice presidents or the people reporting directly to vice presidents that have the ability to speak for that line of business and to be able to assist in mediating when folks lower in the organization in these committees and working groups can't come to a decision about something. The Data Advisory Council will be the organization that can mediate and make final determination as to enterprise business policies, business procedures, et cetera, as well as advise and make sure that priorities for data management are actually in line with the business priorities and the needs of the organization. Committees and working groups get pulled from data stewards across various functional areas and can be driven either by enterprise subject area, by business processes that cross multiple domains or communities of interest, or cross various business domains. In those committees and working groups, the stewards from both the business side and then from the IT side of the house actually drive and will help develop the enterprise policies, standards, metrics, et cetera. The Strategy Center or your data governance program will also have a compliance arm typically that will be responsible for enforcing and ensuring that those policies, processes, standards actually get used and followed across the organization. So as you're working through identifying priorities and needs and what your strategy is in an organization, again, if you haven't done data management or data governance formally in your organization, it can look like you're trying to climb a huge mountain because there is an awful lot of work to do. It's important not to try to boil the ocean. Data management, data governance is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Part of the key to driving this work into completion is actually to identify key use cases in your organization to begin working through specifics from each of these functional areas that are most important to the organization. I'm going to provide you an example in this next slide about how to do that. So this next slide shows what is termed a spider map. We've got a use case of consumer engagement. We as an organization want to understand our consumers better, want to be able to react to their needs better, want to be able to provide more product recommendations to them, upsell them services, just become closer to our consumers. So what does that mean in terms of our functional framework? Again, we're starting with our functional framework, and we've got a lot of things that we could possibly tackle on there. But in terms of our specific use case of consumer engagement, we're going to boil it down into some very specific items, starting with data governance and just sort of moving around. So from data governance, you may have very specific policies, processes, definitions, and standards that you want to set around consumer engagement. For example, what do we mean by consumer? Is that someone who has actually purchased something from us? Or is a consumer someone who has come to our website or into our retail store but hasn't actually purchased anything from us yet? Having a clear definition, clearly defining what we mean by consumer is a really important starting point and grounding point for the rest of the organization so that we're all on the same page. There are a variety of policies and processes that may be developed around consumer engagement. For example, how do we get new data in about consumers? What's the process for integrating new data with existing data, et cetera? From a data quality standpoint, we may take a look at source systems that we already have about our consumers and verify the quality of the data that sits within those systems before we want to add any additional data. So for example, if we do a scan of our most important consumer database, are we missing email addresses? And what percentage of email addresses are missing? What percent of names aren't following a typical naming convention, or phone numbers aren't following a typical phone number convention, and how can we clean that up before we add new data to it? Metadata, understanding and doing a systems inventory. Where does all the information about consumer live across the organization? If our ultimate goal is to do predictive and prescriptive analytics on the data that we have, how do we ensure that we are actually aggregating all the data that we have in-house? That starts with an inventory of what we've got across the organization, and then we need to identify what the authoritative sources for certain data sets are. We may develop an enterprise data dictionary, et cetera. Master data and reference data. Do we have a unique identifier that exists for our consumers, particularly as we're looking at cross-channel integration? If our online or retail presence uses a different identifier for a consumer than our retail store does, then we've got some problems and challenges when we want to try to merge all of these data sets together and add more data to it. So the unique IDs and being able to uniquely identify an individual, again, is Micheline Casey in this system the same as Micheline M. Casey in this system? Those are really important items to be thought about, to be worked through across your organization. Data security, again, particularly if you're dealing with personally identifiable information or you're within a highly regulated environment like healthcare, pharmaceuticals, legal issues, compliance issues that you need to be worried about and concerned about. You may have a lot of insight on your consumers. Are you actually able to leverage it? Can you actually give certain information to your sales team to sell more product, because you might actually be out of regulatory compliance if you do that. Having your chief privacy officer or your chief information security officer as part of the dialogue and part of the discussion is important. And finally, I want to talk just briefly about document and content management. Many organizations have a lot of unstructured data that sits in document repositories and document management systems. Don't overlook the inclusion of those data assets as you're working through your data management processes. There's a lot of valuable data that exists in document form that can provide additional insights, whether you're in the healthcare organization and you've got clinical notes, or you've got a signed form from a client that actually gives you permission to do something with their data. It's important to recognize and be able to integrate through a common taxonomy the documents and other unstructured content, that could be video data, audio data, et cetera, that you want to pull in to provide a very holistic picture, a 360 picture of your consumers. All right, so as we kind of wrap towards the close, I don't see any other questions yet. We might get some more. So as you're thinking through this, how can you drive more value from your data through data-centric thinking? You're hearing lots of things out there about data. Data is the new oil. Data is a key business asset. We've got analogies to distributed nervous systems. The reality is that we are in a data-centric world, and this requires a new way, a different way of thinking about data and managing data so that it can be optimally leveraged across the organization. I'm going to walk through what that looks like with the framework for data-driven thinking. What you should be doing within your organizations is thinking about your data needs from the development and planning of business strategies. As early as possible in your organizational planning, you should be thinking about what the data needs of the organization are, and to identify the data requirements early and holistically as possible across an organization. If you wait until it's time to turn a business case over to IT and allow IT to gather requirements, they're not going to be thinking about the data needs that you might have or other business units might have about those data assets the same way that you would. So some of the questions that you can be thinking about to drive more business value out of your data. What business problems or opportunities are we trying to solve or go after? What questions do we need to answer to be able to solve those problems? What data do we need to answer the questions? What data do we already have in-house? What data are we missing? And can we get that data either through open data sets, through purchasing it from data brokers, or through some other mechanism, maybe social media? How can data help differentiate us in the marketplace? What data is intellectual property for us? What's revenue-generating data for us? Then how do we go about the business of actually integrating this data together? How do we manage the quality of the data? How do we relate one set of data to another set of data, particularly as we look at capturing real-time streams of data, whether through sensor data or social media data? Are we sure that we're integrating captured data into the right master data sets? For example, you've got a profile of someone called Micheline Casey. Are we actually collecting the right Twitter streams from Micheline Casey and integrating that correctly into her data? And finally, what are the permissible purposes and uses of the data? You should be thinking about that very early in the process and making sure you include your chief privacy officers as well as your chief information security officers. And then who's allowed to access the data? Who can use the data? What are the permissible uses of the data? Something else I want to point out, I'm going to flip back a slide. The red box below that sort of is cross-cutting discusses finance and procurement. More and more we're seeing data moving to the cloud, outsourced SaaS applications, et cetera. One thing that's critical to be thinking about is are data-related questions. If data goes out to the cloud, who actually owns that data? How quickly can you get the data back in-house to tag it and match it and integrate it into your enterprise data repositories or your other analytical systems? If you're outsourcing to a software as a service organization, is their data dictionary in line with your data dictionary? Or will they follow your data dictionary? Will they follow your enterprise data models? Do we have contract language to support the alignment with service level agreements, privacy rights, et cetera? Those are all things that you on the business side of the house should be thinking about in terms of procuring new systems or outsourcing data needs that you have. So finally, let's just look at what does success mean? If we're thinking about data and managing our data in different ways, how do we know we've been successful about it? We do need to be much more proactive and not reactive in terms of thinking about our data, and we need to be much more strategic versus tactical in thinking about our data. Here are some success measures. Ultimately, success looks different for every organization, but let's just talk about a few of these. First of all, you have information that you can trust. This goes back to your data quality programs as well as data integration. Are you actually integrating data the way you should be integrating data and matching the right data to the right people? And do you have a high degree of confidence in the data that you've got? Speed to market. Are you able to do things more effectively, more efficiently, more nimbly than you've been able to do in the past? How much time are you spending looking for data today across your organization, and are you able to reduce that time? How long does it take you to actually answer questions? If you're a business analyst or a manager and you're spending 70% of your time actually trying to identify data sets to merge together and spending a lot of time actually matching that data up and maneuvering it so it meshes together, but only 30% of your time actually analyzing it, are you able to flip that ratio? Can you spend 70% of your time actually thinking about and trying to answer the questions and only 30% of the time trying to get your hands on the data that you need to do your job? Questions are actually answerable. Today in your organization, are you able to actually answer the questions you want to answer? If not, and you put a data management program into place, are you now able to answer those questions because you've got a stronger feel for the data that you have and how that data has actually been managed? Are you able to get more insights around your customers and achieve more intimacy? And again, more from an IT side of the house, but are you actually able to integrate and develop new applications, new apps, new products faster than you were able to before? Again, success will depend on your organization and what's important to it. These are just some things to think about. Finally, are you prepared for this new world of data centricity to be a data-driven environment? Do you have an enterprise data strategy? Does your data strategy tie directly to your organization's business strategy and business goals? Is there an executive with the authority and budgetary responsibility appointed as the data czar or the chief data officer who sits on the business side of the organization and aligns the data needs of the organization with the business needs of the organization? What's your data story? Why is data important to you and to your organization? And again, this is from your customer's perspective, not from a technical perspective. Do you know what data you have, and do you know information about your data, the metadata about your data, who's responsible for it, what business processes consume it, when it needs to be destroyed, et cetera, et cetera? Do you have a governance board in place, and a governance board that represents the majority of your organizational stakeholders, including potentially your business partners and your customers? And does that governance board have the authority to develop enterprise policies, processes, standards, definitions, and metrics, and to enforce compliance? And are you thinking about the data needs of the organization through the entire strategic planning and IT development lifecycle? And finally, and perhaps most importantly, does your organization's culture truly support the vision of data as an organizational asset? So it looks like we've got about 9 minutes left, about 10 minutes left. I think we started a few minutes late to answer any questions. I certainly appreciate you joining me today, and we'll take any calls that you have.
Thank you so much, Micheline. And as you can imagine, we have several questions that have come in. So, folks, we are at Q&A. If you do have a question from Micheline, open your group chat widget if you haven't already done that. Click on it, open it, type your question, and send it in, and we'll go through as many as we have time for. Okay, we'll take them in the order they came in. We have a question from Daniel. He asks, does the Data Governance Office tackle both structured and unstructured data, or is a different body needed for unstructured data?
Great question, Daniel. Thank you for asking it. The data governance body, whether you call it a data governance council or program, should look at all of the data across the organization, structured and unstructured. Technically, how that data gets managed may be very different, but conceptually and logically in the policies and processes that are needed, it doesn't matter what the type of data is. It should all be driven from the same operating body.
Thank you. A question now from Dom. What kind of incentives are commonly available, example bonus schemes, to ensure that the data governance people are fully engaged?
Another great question. In fact, this aligns itself very nicely to my last point around organizational culture, right? Because people do what you incent them to do, what they're measured to do. And in fact, people today across your organization are already acting as data stewards. They're probably not given that title, and they're probably not being recognized for it, but there are people managing your data today. They may not be managing it well, but data is being managed in your organization. So oftentimes what you'll see are key performance indicators or metrics that get driven through the data governance steering committee that can get operationalized. Again, that depends on your organization and what's important to your organization. It could tie to data quality. It could tie to data contributions and data sharing. It really depends on what things are important to your organization, why data management is important, and what types of behaviors you want to reward. But what is important is to have the dialogue in terms of your organization understanding that if we're going to be thinking about data differently and we're going to be managing data differently, then we need to incent and reward people differently because, again, people are going to do, because it's human nature, what they're incented and rewarded to do. And it's important to have those, a new set of metrics and key performance indicators and reward structures to put in place for, great data management practices across the organization at all levels of the organization.
Thank you. Another question here from Dimitri. How can we find data owners in organizations for common data?
So ownership gets to be a really interesting question. And ownership and stewardship could actually be the same thing, or they could be different things, again, depending on your organization and the type of data that we're talking about. Typically, a data owner will have the ability to have the final say about policies and processes about that particular data asset. When you've got subject areas, for example, that span multiple functional areas, and using individual data, for example, is a great example. So person data exists in multiple locations across almost every company, whether it's in human resources or on the sales side or on the marketing side. There is data about people in all of those organizations, and so they all have a stake in the rules and the policies and processes and the standards around person data. The ultimate data owner actually should get determined by the Data Governance Council, and the person who's got the highest level of authority to make final decisions about a particular subject area or about a particular data entity, and that could be someone whose area is most impacted by that particular data entity, or it could be someone like even the chief financial officer who has the most to gain or the most insights to be driven from that. So it's really going to be dependent, but it's clear, it's important that there is clarity in who the primary data owners are and who are the final decision makers when the mid-tier folks can't come to agreement and sort of need that tiebreaker voice.
Thank you. Now we'll take our final question here from Paul, and Paul would like to know what makes the Colorado data governance model unique compared to other states?
Colorado was the first state to actually formalize that structure via law. So part of what we did, because we wanted to, if you're familiar with how the government sector works, when a new governor or a new president even comes in, and we're seeing this now obviously with the Obama administration, he's appointing new cabinet heads. At the state level, the same thing happens. So, new teams of people come in. And what we wanted to do in Colorado was to ensure that the data management program would span administrations, because it's so vital to the state of Colorado and how it actually the ability to drive policy decisions, the ability to impact customer service, and the ability to make wise resource investment decisions were critically important to the governor's office. And so we wanted to make sure that we had that in legislation, which is what we did. We established the Government Data Advisory Board in legislation. We named the first state chief data officer, and then we passed 2 more laws around information management that impacted all the state agencies. So those things were very unique to the state of Colorado, and some other states have since picked up the legislation as model legislation for what they're trying to do with their data management efforts.
Thank you so much, Micheline. Folks, we are at the top of the hour, so we're going to say a very big thank you to Micheline for presenting a really outstanding webcast for us all, for sharing her knowledge and expertise with us. We'd like to also say a big thank you to all of you that attended our webcast today and hope you benefited from it. We'd also like to let you know that we do have our upcoming Strata Conference in Santa Clara, California on February 26th through the 28th. Use code WEB20 to save on your registration. So we did push out information to you in your group chat how there is still time for you to register for that upcoming conference in February. Save on that registration, very important for you. We'd also like to let you know you can download a copy of today's slides from the green resource widget. That's the green file folder. And there's also additional information there from Cloudera, our sponsor. They had put together a white paper, so we have given access to you all to that and hope you do take a look at it. Lots of valuable information there as well. And as we close, we would like to say a big thank you to Cloudera for sponsoring today's webcast, and to let you all know that Cloudera, the standard for Apache Hadoop in the enterprise, empowers data-driven enterprises to ask bigger questions and get bigger answers from all their data at the speed of thought. Reinventing the economics and performance of big data management, Cloudera is a category leader in Apache Hadoop-based software, services, and training. With tens of thousands of nodes under management across customers across a multitude of industries, Cloudera's depth of big data experience and expertise are unrivaled. Thank you, Cloudera. Folks, that will conclude today's presentation. Goodbye, everybody.